everyone. So as Mandy said, this is my third year speaking at a Take Back the Night event, and it is my second year here at UC Irvine. And I have to say that this is honestly one of the most powerful and inspiring programs and events that I've ever been a part of in my life, and that is in no small part to all of you. So please give yourselves a round of applause for taking the step to come out here tonight. A while back, I gave a talk at a conference which had this theme of underlying causes of conflict. And I was asked to come and talk about gender as being one of those underlying causes. And in planning tonight to come up and talk to all of you, I thought that that was a pretty fitting topic to speak about, because sexual assault is a very, very gendered crime. So coming here to Take Back the Night during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I think it's important to talk about gender. For those of you that don't know, the majority of sexual assaults, in fact 99% it is estimated, are perpetrated by men. And overwhelmingly, these are crimes that are committed against women, 90 to 91% of the time. And for those sexual assaults perpetrated against other men, overwhelmingly again, the perpetrators are males. So to talk about sexual violence without mentioning gender, to me would be like talking about the history of the United States without mentioning the Revolutionary War. And so that's why I want to talk about gender tonight. But before I go into it, I want to get a quick assessment of all of you. So if you could please raise your hand high if your gender is female. Great, thank you. Okay, and once again, please raise your hand high if your gender is male. Thank you guys for coming out. Okay, thanks for that, and we'll come back to that. In talking about gender, I want to address three main questions tonight. The first one is, what's the difference between sex and gender? That's a very important difference to distinguish. Second question, how does gender relate to this theme of conflict or this topic of sexual violence? And then lastly, what can we do about it? So that first question, what's the difference between sex and gender? And as defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary, sex is either of the two major forms of individuals that occur in many species and that are distinguished respectively as female or male, especially on the basis of their reproductive organs and structures. So essentially, sex is the biological characteristics that differentiate men and women. Now, there are relatively rare examples of people that don't fit into those two categories, people who are born with both male and female parts, but for the most part, people can be categorized as male or female according to sex. Gender, on the other hand, is defined a little differently. Gender, once again, the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is the behavioral, cultural, or psychological traits typically associated with one's sex. Now, a key thing I want to note about gender is socially constructed. That's very important. And whereas sex consists of discrete differences, so you are either male or you are female for the most part, we'll call that a binary, gender is more of a continuum. A person can fall anywhere on this continuum between what is socially constructed as masculine and what is socially constructed as feminine. However, when we think about gender, we tend to think of it as a binary as well. Going back to that game we played a little bit ago about raising our hands, when I asked you to raise your hand earlier, based on your gender, what was it that you thought of? When you raised your hand, did you think, well, I've got male parts, so I'm going to raise my hand now. I'm a male. I've got female parts, so it's appropriate for me to raise my hand now. I don't think that there were many of you thinking, well, based on my psychological, cultural, or behavioral traits, I fall somewhere in the middle, so I'm just going to raise my hand halfway. I didn't see a lot of people, unless you were a little timid. I don't think that that was your rationale. The reason that we do that, the reason we think of gender as a binary, is because it serves an important purpose for us. It helps us to create a schema, or a way of organizing and making sense of the world. So you can be walking down the street, you can come across someone and say, okay, that person looks like a male. I know something about him, because I know how men are. And that helps us to make sense and make the world just a little bit easier to get around, right? But the problem is, when we think of gender as a binary, it tends to create conflict. So for psych or sociology students, or anyone else, you might be aware of the us versus them mentality. You are either one of us, or you are not one of us, you are one of them. And that creates some problems, particularly when one group has power over another group. And in many societies, including our own, we see patriarchal systems in place, in which men are dominant and have more social status.